Ruth Kenyingi, please pray.
Let us pray. Our Father in heaven, thank you, God, for this day. As we start our webinar series, guide us. May all the discussions run smoothly, and may we be able to learn more. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen.
Amen. Thank you. That was Emma, not Ruth, from The Voice. So welcome, everybody, for this webinar. This is the second in a series of 8 webinars that are planned for us. All of them on COVID-19. We had the first one which was on COVID-19 biology. Today's webinar is on COVID-19 variants. The presenter is Dr. William Sogok of the School of Medicine. And so Dr. Sogok, do I see you? Oh yes, William, you're appearing as William?
Yes, yes.
Thank you, Dr. Just tell us how you're going to structure the presentation. Do you want to run through? Are you going to stop somewhere in the middle so that we can have interaction? Just guide us on your intention as far as the presentation is concerned.
Yeah, so Emma had sent me a outline of how I should carry out the presentation. And then he said the first few minutes I introduce myself, and then I go right into the presentation. So the first set of presentation is just to talk about variants, what is a variant, and how do variants come about, and what are the different types of variants that are out there for COVID. And then that should run for about 10 minutes to 15. And then we'll take a Q&A. For anybody who has a question concerning the variants that are presented. And then we'll take a short break and come back for the second session. We should run for about the same time as time span for the first session, and then go for Q&A and end it there.
Thank you.
Yes.
Go right ahead then, we are all ears.
Okay. I thank you, everyone. Thank you for this invitation and bringing this meeting to this point. I really appreciate the organization from the office. So as you've heard, was introduced, my name is Dr. William Songok. I am lecturer in the School of Medicine, Department of Medical Microbiology and Parasitology. My area of training is on human papillomavirus that causes cervical cancer. So that's what I did for my PhD as well as for my postdoctoral studies. And I mean, I've stayed with viruses for almost about 10 years now. So I've been studying viruses left, right. And here at Kenyatta University, I teach second year medical students as well as pharmacy. And the courses that I teach is Introduction to Virology, and then Pathogenesis and Pathogenic Viruses. That is the second session that runs for both. I teach pharmacy as well as medical students in that aspect. So I mean, these topics in virology and this course have really come in handy at this point in time, since we have the advent of COVID and students are very excited to learn about it. In fact, I dedicate a whole lecture just on coronaviruses. So that is it about
I know the meaning.
at Kenyatta University. So I'll go right into today's topic, unless anybody has a question. Okay, so let's get right into the reason why we're here, what we are going to talk about. So as you all have heard about, coronavirus, pretty much we all know where it came from. It came from, the first origin was Wuhan, China, and then before long, the whole world was under the pandemic. And at this point, as we speak, there have been many variants that have come about. So I wanted to step back, not to belittle your knowledge, but just to introduce what a variant is and how do scientists classify variants. So just as the name suggests, a variant is what differs, what is different from the status quo. Like, if you were to compare the original with a new set, it doesn't look exactly identical as the previous one, but it kind of still maintains the same form. So you see some changes a little bit in the new form compared to the original one. And that's when we now have these variants. And the thing about these variants, to identify really what a variant is from the original one, in science, they tend to term it wild type, is that they look at the genome organization. For instance, they sequence the genome, they take it through a machine that gives a different basis, and then they check where is this one exactly the same as the original one, and if it has changed, by how much, what is the variation between the original and the second one. So that name variation variant, comes from there. So coronavirus has gone through this as well. And this is not unique just to coronavirus. It is common in other viruses as well that are of this nature. So something a little bit about coronavirus is that coronavirus is an RNA virus. So there are two sets of viruses. We have DNA viruses, and then we have RNA viruses. One thing that is unique about RNA virus is that it's one of the only, it's found, if you look at all the other microorganisms, viruses are the only ones that have a genetic code that is purely RNA. The other ones, bacteria, protists, archaea, they tend to have DNA in them. So for instance, in our genome, we have the DNA. And one thing that is good about DNA is that whenever it's replicating the genome, it corrects the mistakes that it makes. RNA viruses don't have that nice mechanism of correcting their mistakes. So I usually like to use this analogy of think as though you're writing with an ink pen versus a pencil. If you're writing with a pencil, you have a chance to kind of go back and say, hey, I made a mistake here, I'm gonna change it. But if you're writing with a pen, you can be wink it and say, I'll either cross it or, you don't easily fix the mistake. So the thing with DNA viruses, they have a really nice proofreading mechanisms, like they can really proofread it. But for RNA viruses, they make mistakes. And those mistakes, they are two ways. It can be either detrimental for the virus, or it can be really good for the virus. So if it is really good for the virus and it allows, for instance, transmission, immune evasion, then the virus by default will keep this mutation and pass it to the, replicate it and pass it to the next set of offspring. If it is bad, the virus pretty much, is degraded or is, removed by the host immune response, okay? So that is why you tend to see variation. So what are some of the reasons why viruses undergo mutations? What causes them to change? So there are about 3 or 4 major reasons why viruses undergo mutation. Why did COVID change? Why did it just not remain the COVID that came from Wuhan, China? So one aspect that really pushes the virus to change over time, to have those teeny tiny small changes that are really significant on the bigger side, is because of transmission. When a virus gets a chance to transmit itself, as I mentioned, it encounters the host immune response, and that pushes the virus to make changes that allows it now to be more relevant. Okay, so transmission. If you go to areas where the virus transmitted a lot, you tend to see mutations that lots of mutation within that area. And this is the same case with HIV. Most of the studies for HIV virus were done in West Africa because that's where it believed the virus to have originated from. And I think in a span of 10 years, they had seen almost a 5% gene difference between the original HIV and the new serotype that you are seeing. So viruses undergo these mutations over time because of that transmittability. If people are not vaccinated, if the virus is not removed within a short time, and then you tend to see mutations there. The other reason is that, as I mentioned, is just the evolution mechanisms. Okay, so viruses, as I mentioned, it make errors, and for it to stay relevant, it has to, change its genome over time for it to be transmitted. The other most important, all of these points, they seem to tie together, is the host immune response. Because every time the virus comes in, your body is just not going to sit out there and say, yeah, welcome in, I'm here. It will resist. And we have immune cells that fight, the white blood cells, We have T cells, B cells. So they play a role in terms of inhibiting these viruses. So when these viruses encounter these problems, I mean, it pushes them, it gives them this pressure to make some changes that are going to allow the virus to stay relevant. So those are some of the reasons why you tend to see mutations in viruses. And the other thing that I like to mention is that where are these mutations located in the virus? So the genome, that is inside the virus, the genetic information is what controls what comes out. So there's a section within the virus genome that is just specific for the capsid protein, and that is the spike that sticks out. So if you've seen those nice images of coronaviruses, they have these nice spokes that stick out. That is the area that comes and bind to the cell and enter. So whenever viruses, if they need to make a mutation, they will really target that region that normally allows the virus to enter. So most of the mutations that occur, these variations that you see in the variants, are just on that spike proteins, a majority of them. So I actually tell my students, think about this as a key and lock mechanism. So if your immune system is the lock, and then every time you put in the key, it just opens the door. After a while, the virus changes the key. So every time your body wants to let the virus in, so it makes it a little bit difficult. So it's just not that smooth for the virus to, for the whole cell, to resist the virus from coming in. Okay? So that is some of the reasons, and that is where we tend to see mutations. So over time, since the original virus came, in 2019, there have been quite a number of mutations that have occurred over a span of 2 years. I mean, this is, given the relevance of COVID, scientists have been able to really track and see what is happening when and where do we see these mutations. So some of the variants that you've heard probably through social media and what we see on the news is, so we have the alpha variant, we have the beta variant. So there are two, there are variants of concern, and there are those variants that are just of, not as virulent as you will see for the other variants. So we've had alpha, we've had beta, we've had gamma, and at the moment we have Omicron. So they tend to use these Greek letters to really help from stigmatization, because virologists, whenever they're naming these viruses, there's not really clear taxonomy when it comes to naming viruses in virology. It's not like bacteriology where they have a really well-organized system. So for virology, if you discover a virus, you can decide to call it whatever you want. You can call it John Kenyatta University virus, Gedorai virus, whatever you want to call it. So when they called it Chinese virus, I mean, the Chinese were upset, and that's why they started giving these names, Delta. They can imagine South African variant. People of South Africa will not be happy with it. And as you can see with the advent of Omicron variant, South Africa were also saying that, since it was discovered by the lab in South Africa, they were saying that, now we are being labeled as the one who gave the world the Omicron variation, yet it is us who just discovered. So they tend to use these names just to remove that stigmatization. And then we have others like, epsilon, zeta, eta, theta. I mean, there's quite a number. There are over 10 variants that are currently circulating within the environment. Okay, so those are some of the variants that I've mentioned why viruses undergo these mutations. And at this point, I can take a few questions concerning the variants, why they arise, and what we see. And then on the next set, I'm going to move on the pathogenesis. How does Delta compare with Omicron? Are we likely to see another variant? And then we'll talk about the vaccination and whether the vaccine. I guess I got muted for some reason. Sorry. Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay.
Yes, we can now.
Okay. I don't know, when did you lose me?
Less for a minute.
Oh, just for a minute. Okay,
No.
that's better. I was just hoping that I'd not been going for on and on without So as I was saying, at this point, I can stop to take questions concerning the variants. And then when we come back from a short break, we'll talk about the pathogenesis. For instance, how does Omicron compare to Delta and other variants? And then we'll talk about vaccinations and whether this variant can break through these vaccines. And finally, we'll talk about where we stand with COVID and how does the future look like when it comes to coronavirus. So any questions from the panel, from the listeners, if you have any?
I have a question, William.
Yes, go ahead, please.
Thank you. This is Dr. Uko.
Yes, thank you, Doc.
I feel, okay, it's a good presentation, a very detailed one when it comes to, viral issues.
Yeah.
But it sounds more like a class thing, and those of us who have attended were like, the next stage you want to go to maybe will do a lot of service to us. That what's the status of where are we headed?
Yes.
Because my question was essentially, now that we have Omicron, the latest mutation.
Yes.
Does it mean, from your discussion, is like we have mutations many we should have even identified so far? So we already know Omicron from the original COVID-19. So you wonder, maybe you want to comment about whether do we have more that have not been brought to our knowledge out there other than Omicron, the South African thing. And then most importantly, how does this one presentation, this knowledge help us? And that's why I said it sounds like a medic class.
Sure.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Doc. I get you. And the reason why I started that way was kind of just to bring everybody in place, because the second phase, as you mentioned, is going to be more into the pathogenesis of why we see what we see. But I think this was just laying ground on, if somebody says a variant, okay, what does that variant mean? And why do we have variants? So as I mentioned, the reason why we have this variant is because of our body trying to resist these viruses, okay? And you mentioned a very important point of, I've mentioned that there's many of them, and it seems that Omicron is the only one that is making, or Delta. What about the others? Okay, so there are many variants that have come about, but it is those of concern, the one that spreads more, the one that kills people more, is what we care about the most. Because as I mentioned, there are many viruses out there. They infect plants, they infect, archaea bacteria. And, we don't care so much about that in this setting, in as much as we just care about those ones that actually causes diseases and have severity. So Omicron is the one that stands out. And there are many other more. As I mentioned, there is Epsilon, and there is Zeta, there is Theta. And we don't really talk much about that because it doesn't cause severe diseases to people. Okay. So when we move to the second set, it's really gonna make you care. Why do we care about these mutations and where are we headed? Okay. So that's a nice question, Dr. Uko. Okay. Any other person with a question?
Dr.
Yes.
My name is Sagaswale. I just wanted to know, in terms of the naming, I read in the social media at some point there is one variant known as Delta Micron. Does it exist? Is it a mixture of the two in terms of naming? That's all. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you for your question. I haven't come across Delta Micron, but given the name as you suggest, it could be having more similarities between a Delta and Omicron. Okay, so it's possible, but in my reading and what I've seen, I haven't come across that. It's possible that's there and just that I missed. So there's a possibility that's there. Okay. So sorry. Any other So I see a question here on the chat. What is the way forward concerning vaccination now that the mutation seems to be having a breakthrough? I'll answer that as we go along. Yeah, that will be answered in the next session. Next set, sorry. Okay. Any other question about variants and why they come about? So there was one.
Doctor. Yes, Dr.
Yes, go ahead.
Yes, I'm Dr. Richard Cheruiyot.
Okay.
I wanted, thank you for that initial presentation. I was wondering whether this mutation is sequential, starting from alpha. Was it following any order in terms of mutation? And if so, are alpha and all these others before Delta and Omicron, are they likely to cause other mutations that are going to be of interest in terms of medical attention?
Yes, that is a very good question, Dr. Cheruiyot. So in terms of naming these viruses, just to answer your question, it is random, because you find that, alpha, was named, and then you have Zeta from Brazil, which came before Beta and Gamma and Omicron. So you see Z is at the end, and Beta is at the beginning. So I mean, they just give it random name. It's like when they are naming the tsunamis in the United States, they just give it whatever name they feel like. So it really doesn't follow any sequential order in terms of their naming. Who knows what the next one is going to be? I mean, they may just give it another Greek letter name. So the other question that you followed with that, are they going to cause another mutation that's going to be of clinical significance? So based on the history and what we've seen so far with the advent of mutation, because it seems like every 6 months or so, there's another new mutation coming about. So of major concern, we've seen these 5 mutations that have been of clinical relevance in a span of 2 years. I mean, this is quite a number of mutations. And are we likely to see another one at all this, going to undergo mutation to get another variant? It's very possible, as long as the virus is still circulating around. As I mentioned, one of the reasons why mutation arise is because of transmission. So as long as we still have transmission between people, there is a very high likelihood that we are going to have another variant in the near future. Yeah. But that's just my take on it, based on the statistics and the trend of what has been happening. Yeah.
Daktari, this is Dr. James Ogutu.
Yes, Dr. Ogutu.
My question is, what would be the significance of animals in the variant development, and probably in eliciting or encouraging mutation? One of the issues that have arisen with the COVID-19 is it probably originated from animals.
Yes.
Do you have something to say about this?
Yeah, just to step back a little bit in terms of the origin, as you mentioned, bats were the culprit. They have been linked to be the source or the vectors for coronavirus. And if you look at it, like we had the SARS-CoV-1, the first variant of corona that came about, that was in 2003. So it came from bats. It went to humans as well. And then we had MERS, Middle East Respiratory respiratory virus, which was, but the good thing with that one is that it just spread a little bit in Middle East and it was gone. And that was transmitted by camels to humans through their contacts. And now we have coronavirus, which is thought to have come from bats, either directly to humans or bats to pangolins, and then to humans. It's not really clear which animal, gave us COVID, because China, they've really closed, and whatever data they get, it may not be released to the world. So going back to your questions, what role do animals play when it comes to mutations of these viruses? So one thing about bats is that they have a really nice immune response, unlike humans. Like, for instance, when we get infected with coronavirus, the thing that kills people, sometimes not even the virus, it's how your body responds. Like, you have a very robust immune response that goes to fight the virus. In the process, it actually damages your own cells. So it's like an enemy within. It is your own body fighting itself. It's just, I usually take an example of, think about, somebody, went and stole a chicken, and then they call KDF to come and deal with the problem. They will just really deal with it severely, other than just having a local chief deal with that. So your immune system just goes into this heightened response, and people usually die from cytokine storm more than actually the replication of the virus. So bats have a way of controlling this. The immune system is really well, developed, and they can adapt to live with coronavirus. They don't die from it because they just keep their immune system really low, not that heightened. So what role do viruses play when it comes to these mutations? So all these mutations that I've mentioned, alpha, beta, delta, gamma, up to Omicron, all of this mutation occurred from human to human transmission. None of it has spilled over back to the bats or to the animals, and then zoonotic back to the animals, and then come back to humans. So from what's happening now, it's mostly human to human transmission that is driving this mutation. But if you look at other diseases like influenza, they came from ducks to humans. So animals have a role in terms of mutation for sure, although we haven't seen this with the several mutations that we've seen. But it's possible that, there might be a new mutation in bats now, it just hasn't spilled over to the human beings. So animals, they have a significant role in spreading the zoonotic diseases. So thank you, Dr. Ogutu, for that. Okay, I guess, Ima, how are we doing in time?
It's past, so we have another half hour.
Okay, good. So do you want us to take a short break and then come back, or just keep going?
We keep going.
Okay.
We keep going. Okay,
good. So, and you can read the question for me on the chat once as I continue. So I've mentioned these mutations. The one, we have the one that originally came from China, and then we have the Delta variant, and then the Delta came from United Kingdom, and then we have the Omicron. It's really not sure where is it UK, is it South Africa? It seems that it was in UK before it was discovered in South Africa. And what is different about these mutations compared to the original variant, okay, in terms of the presentation? So one thing about this mutation, let's just go straight into the signs and symptoms of when somebody gets, like, do you present with different symptoms if you have Omicron versus Delta versus Alpha? So one thing about this presentation, the disease presentation tend to be the same. Like, people will have fever, as we mentioned, they will have joint pain, they are going to have, probably some coughing, shortness of breath if it advances. And then one telltale sign that people have reported for an extended amount of time when they have COVID is the loss of smell. Okay, so that is always has been, it's unlike influenza, rhinovirus, and respiratory syncytial virus. So loss of smell has been almost the kind of telltale for a majority of people who had COVID. And the reason for this, it's not that the virus is actually infecting the nerve cells that are important for smelling, but actually it actually damages part of the supporting cells for the olfactory nerves that are important for smelling. So that has always been the telltale sign. So how does Omicron differ from Delta when it comes to transmission? So the first variant that came from China, it was transmissible to some extent. When Delta came, it was more transmissible, and then it presented with severe disease manifestation. Omicron, on this other end, has been shown to be almost like twice or 1.5 times more transmissible than the Delta variant. The good news that we've learned about Omicron for the past 2 months that it's been around is that in as much as Omicron is highly transmissible than Delta and the original variant, it doesn't cause severe disease presentation. Like, people are able to clear it without undergoing, going through the whole course of infection in a majority of the population, not just in everybody. So that has been the good news that has come with Omicron, so to say. So when it comes to hospitalization, as we saw, I think it was around December, we were up to over 20% when it came to positivity rate, and now we are down to I think 4% the last I checked. So as a country, we are doing well when it comes to Omicron, and this can be two things: either people are not getting sick to go to the hospital to be tested, or it could be just that we are not testing enough to know where the virus is as far as it has gone. And to know whether Omicron, how many people actually have Omicron versus Delta, they need to do gene sequencing, and that takes time, and it's quite expensive to do that. So I don't know what is the percentage of Omicron cases in Kenya compared to Delta. I think that's the large number of cases that we saw could have been attributed to Omicron. And we've seen the cases go down in terms of hospitalization, as I mentioned, because the virus is less transmissible in that case. So that is it when it comes to pathogenesis of how the virus spread. And we've seen when it comes to those people who are presenting with severe diseases when it comes to Omicron, those with underlying conditions already, like we have diabetes, cancer patients, and patients with just compromised immune response, HIV patients, those on transplant. They, despite the variant being not as virulent as the others, they may catch the virus afresh and go through the whole course of the infection. So of concern is the vaccination that we've been, that the government is pushing for people to get, and actually I am for vaccination in most presentations that I've been. Is how does vaccination go along when it comes to the new variants? Are you protected? Are you going to get sick? There's so many questions that people have asked about this vaccination. So one thing I like to say about vaccination is that vaccination have been here with us for a long time, since the time of Edward Jenner, 1700s up to now. We've had vaccines, and they've really helped humanity in terms of protecting against many diseases that have been out there. Think about this: we have smallpox that killed several people, and right now we can say the world is smallpox free, because the last case was in Sudan in 1978. So we've not had any cases of smallpox because of eradication, but through the vaccination. And then we have the polio vaccine, which has really helped in terms of protecting children and people from getting polio. So vaccines have been there, and they've helped in terms of protecting against getting deformities or severe disease presentation in this case. So one thing about this vaccine is that they are not 100% effective. There's this notion that we have that once you are vaccinated, you are prevented. No, most of it is not just 100% effective. So when you look at the vaccination rate, for instance, human papillomavirus vaccine is almost 99% effective. When it comes to polio, is 95. When it comes to Pfizer and Moderna, they're around 90 to 95% effective against the Delta, against the original variant, sorry. So these vaccines, they are not 100% effective. So the fact that somebody has got a vaccine doesn't mean that they will not be infected. So there's a possibility of infection. But one thing that has been noted is that those individuals who have been vaccinated actually have higher chances of not having severe disease presentation. For instance, I was just looking at some statistics that was coming out of Johns Hopkins Medical School, and it was showing that 70% of the patients who are actually in ICU right now did not receive the first shot of the vaccine. So what a vaccine does is that once the virus has entered the cell, you have the production of these white blood cells that go actually and combat the virus. It doesn't stop the virus from entering. The virus can still enter, but the patient or the person who is infected is not going to present with severe disease presentation compared to somebody who is not vaccinated. So it just doesn't protect 100%. You still have some infection that can occur, but you may not need to go to the hospital and get oxygen and be in the ICU for an extended amount of time, because you already have the antibodies to prevent against disease severity. So vaccinations are good. And then when it comes to Omicron and Delta, how do they compare when it comes to vaccination? So it's been shown that for Pfizer and Moderna and AstraZeneca, that these variants can actually, break through this vaccination. As much as you've been vaccinated, you still get infected and get sick, but not to a greater extent. And it's been shown that actually, I think there was a study that came out of South Africa a month and a half ago when Omicron just came, and it showed that the Omicron variant was 40%. The antibodies were not effective 40% of the time on preventing against Omicron variant. So it can still overcome the host immune response in this case. So now there is a new push for a booster shot, where we have been encouraged to go for another third shot. And I really encourage those who are listening to really go and get a third shot if you've gotten the first two, or if you got the Johnson & Johnson, which is just one, to go for another shot. And studies have shown that actually mixing and matching this vaccine is the best. Like if you got AstraZeneca for the first shot, the second shot was AstraZeneca, it's advisable that you go for the Pfizer or Moderna in this case. So because it's been shown that that tend to have a robust immune response. Because one thing about this vaccine is that they wane over time. Over time, they just kind of deplete, if you had a liter of water, it kind of goes down with time. So by the time you get to 6 months, you're down to half or a quarter of a liter. So that's the same thing with these antibodies. Like over time, they decrease in our bodies, and then we need a booster shot to kind of bring us up to speed to where we need to be. So now, that is being encouraged to go for a third shot. But as there's been quite some resistance in people getting the vaccinations, and there are quite a number of reasons for that. And people have, their perspective on why they should be vaccinated or not. And I think what has been lacking sometimes is the information to the public. So the variant breakthrough has been of major concern to the scientific and the public health system, in that, if we don't have enough vaccinated people and a new variant comes in, we are likely to go back to the loop where we started from. As we know, Kenya has been through, I believe, 4 waves now, or we're going to, so if we don't get enough people who have had the vaccines or who have been infected and recovered successfully and have antibodies against the virus, then, we may end up with another variant and we don't know how that variant is going to be. As Dr. Cheriat asked about this, are we likely to see another one that is going to be severe? It's possible. If we still have the virus circulating, we may get to that point where we go back to the same loop. Okay. So I will open it for a few questions, and then I will wrap up with by talking about how does the future look like in Kenya, and maybe Kenyatta University in that case. So anybody ask questions about, vaccination, Omicron? And
we have some questions on the chat.
Okay,
you
go
could
ahead.
Look at those.
Okay. Let's see. Okay, there's a question here.
kindly provide more information on long COVID by AN?
Okay. So it's asking, kindly provide more information on long-term heart and cardiac and other side effects for those infected with and recovered from COVID. This has been happening to healthy persons like professional athletes who under ordinary circumstances would not have cardiac attack, heart attack and lesions. So yeah, so the question here is, what are the long-term effects of coronavirus once you've been infected and you recovered? So I like to take this, coronavirus has been found to have tropism for many tissues within the cells. As long as you have the receptor, which is AC2 in this case, available in that region, it is going to enter that area. So if the AC2 receptor is present in the brain cell, it will go there. If it's present in the heart, it will go there. So one thing that has been noticed about this is that even those individuals who had coronavirus and recovered, after a while, there is difficulties just in resuming back normal life, like, being able to run or walk fast or be able to carry out the day-to-day activities. This is because, like, if you scratch yourself or you burn yourself, you're going to leave a scar or a wound there. And when it heals, it's not as elastic as it was before. And as we all know, our lungs are very elastic and they need that elasticity to be able to push the fluids out when we are breathing for gaseous exchange in that case. So whenever there's that inflammation within the lobes, the lower lobes of the lung, in this case, it just leaves those scarring tissues. And it can be difficult. You will, if you could run a marathon in 2 hours, 30 minutes, after you recover from COVID, it may be difficult to do that because of that scarring within the alveolar region. And I believe the same thing will happen to the cardiac tissues because you will have inflammation at that point. And, there is recovery of myocardiac muscles. And, it may just leave some scarring tissues there. And, who knows what can happen. And if you have a scar, there's a possibility that you can break that region at some point and maybe have blood clots occurring, and heart attack in that case may happen. So the long-term effect is that, after recovery, you don't go back to 100% normalcy. There might be a possibility of scar tissue. Okay. So recently there was some news from Spain that was classifying coronavirus infection as a normal flu. What is the significant effect that has out on the rest of the world? So the thing is, there's a school of thought that, coronavirus is going down and over time it's gonna wane away. And the fear that people had and the stigmatization that people had, excuse me, about coronavirus is not as severe as it was when it came. So you can remember in Kenya when coronavirus came, it was kind of very, terrifying to people. But right now it's kind of been normalized. So in Spain and UK, they are not even telling people to quarantine for 14 days anymore. If you're not presenting with severe symptoms that I've mentioned, shortness of breath, severe fever, headaches that is not going away, they should tell people just go home for 5 days and come back. It's no longer 14 days. So I think as the severity of the virus seems to be, waning down over time from what we've seen, and people are kind of just classifying it as a common flu. But if you talk to the, CDC, the fellows in CDC and WHO, they are treating this as a serious thing yet. Because when we let down our guards, we don't know what other variants can come about. If we were just dealing with Delta, I'll say we're okay. But as from the trends that we're seeing, we don't know what kind of mutation will come about, okay? So I just say I won't be at that point where I'm just calling it a normal flu, okay, because of common flu. So what are some of the food that a person with COVID-19 or any other virus like Omicron advised to take? So what is the nutritional value? What do you take for nutrition? One thing I should just like to say is that do everything you can to keep your immune system strong so that the virus can be controlled very quickly when it comes to the body. Resting has been shown to be good. Rest more than 8 hours, drink a lot of water, at least 8 glasses a day. Eat a lot of fruits and veggies because that's been shown to enhance the cytokines. Just a balanced diet. Get some multivitamins because we don't get enough vitamins from the food that we eat. Okay, so I should just encourage people, just get the vitamins and take them. That way you have vitamin C and all vitamin B12. that is important for the immune response. But as you all know, the lemons prices shot up when COVID came, and there might be a reason for that. So vitamin C is critical. Okay, the virus wasn't essentially devastating as it was expected in Africa. Africans are known not to be fans of pets. Could this be one of the reasons why? So when you compare the rates of coronavirus in Africa compared to the West, you see that we had, in terms of death rate and transmittability, it was quite low in Africa. I wouldn't say transmittability, but the severity of the disease was quite low in Africa compared to the West. And there are several theories for this. One of it is being hygiene hypothesis. Like in the United States, very clean, so the children don't get exposed to some of the pathogens early in life. And there's been some studies that have shown that actually people get infected with malaria, tapeworms, or all these other communicable diseases tend to resist some of these viral infections better than those who did not. So I shall just tell parents, if your children are playing in the mud, let them play, let them pick those pathogens. As long as you treat them, it's good for the immune system eventually. So, and then the other thing with the West is that there's a huge population shift, like the elderly people. There are many older people than young because of the baby boom generation that is really aging out. And smoking is very high in the United States. I remember I was teaching a class, and out of a class of 10, a class of 50, you may find about 10 students are smoking, and these are teenagers. So as we all know, coronavirus is an upper respiratory tract infection. And if smoking is already there, which is causing lung, inflammation and what have you, and then the virus is easily likely to lodge in there and cause severity. So Africa, I think, we got spared. I think God is good. I mean, we can't deal with any more problems like that. Please enlighten us about the components of the vaccine. Is there attenuated virus, or how are these vaccines made? So how are these vaccines made? Okay, so this is not coming from attenuated virus, the ones that are circulating already. So what happens is that they use two types of technologies. So there is one where they use the RNA technology, and another one they use the DNA technology. So if you look at the polio virus, that's the attenuated form where they take the wild type or the original variant, the virus, and then they make it less severe. It can get into the body, yes, but it doesn't make many virus particles. That is how the polio vaccine was developed. For this, Moderna, AstraZeneca, for AstraZeneca, they use the DNA technology where they take part of the genome that is important for making that spike protein, and then they put it inside a chimpanzee adenovirus. Okay, and then they inject us, and then they inject people with that. And then when that genome gets into your body picks up that genome and takes it to the ribosome to make proteins that similar to the spike protein. So your body will be like, I've seen part of the corona. So it makes antibodies against the virus. Okay, so it's kind of, not the whole virus coming in there, you're just making that small part of the protein which is picked up by the virus. So if you get the AstraZeneca vaccine, you got a little bit of the chimpanzee adenovirus. And then for the Moderna and the Pfizer, what they use is they use the nanoparticles, where they took part of the genome, they put the mRNA, and then they put it inside a lipid molecule. So it's like the cell membrane, is actually transmitting it into the whole cell. So in a nutshell, just to summarize what I've said is that your body is the driving machinery for making antibodies for this. Like they're using your body to make proteins that will be sensed by your body as being foreign and then mount an immune response in that case. Okay. So I think that is all the questions I can see here. Anybody has another question that they would like to ask? You can. The mics are enabled. Any other question? You have about 10 more minutes. Dr. Uku, did I answer your question now that I've gone to the second part?
Indeed, yes. I'm learning a lot, William. Actually, that's a good presentation, and it's also encouraging.
Yeah.
When you have essentially discussed about the efficacy of the various vaccines and what we need to do, and remember that we are not out of the hook we are only, maybe we can only persevere and get out, I mean, get through with it.
Yeah.
But it is always here. Now, you have answered another question I've put there as to why Africa was not as devastated. And although I was, you know, I'm not near medicine or something like that. But my thinking is that, you know, I've seen people they kiss even animals.
Yeah.
Animals are over there. This is a no-go zone for Africans. We don't joke with wherever, and therefore, apart from their aged populations, they love pets too much. They live as if they were part of the animals, and therefore we are not there. And God being on our side, you don't want to hear about God being a medic, but God being on our side, we are able to get all of it that we also experience it. So far, so good. A good presentation. I look for you, and you give me more efficacy.
Sure. So
Yes.
yeah, you've mentioned something about pets, you know, and so as I mentioned, the coronavirus, you know, it kind of jumped from humans to, you know, actually the first one went to cuvette. There's some special cats called cuvette that actually transmitted the first coronavirus. So as you mentioned, in the West, they really like pets. I mean, they will spend every dime, every shilling to take care of their pets. And as I mentioned, in Africa, I think that study showing that, you know, being exposed to many diseases early on in life kind of primes our immune system to have seen many pathogens before. And then, you know, America is very clean, and they have this, you know, hygiene hypothesis where it has shifted. And, you know, if an American came here and just had my Ndichoma out there or Mutura, they would be so sick. But you find that Chokoras can do that without any problem to them. So I think that robust immune system that has been there can be one of the driving force. And smoking, to be honest, a majority of Americans smoke. They smoke a lot. And that, to me, I think might be the reason. And then the aging population. And there might be more reasons than that, but from my observation when I was there, that's what I saw.
Yeah. Dr. Ari?
Yes.
Do we also probably eat more healthy than the Americans? And that would be probably one of the reasons. Then when you answer that, then I have another question.
Yeah, so diet has been shown to really help. As I mentioned, somebody asked out there, you know, what are some of the food that you can eat? And I say, you know, fruits and veggies are good. And also just having a balanced diet, meat here and there. And in the United States, I mean, there's an epidemic of of eating too much. Okay, so the obesity rate is very, very high, you know, in that area. You get children being obese even as low as 10 years. You know, their BMI is just off the roof. And, you know, it's mostly like in the South, in the United States and the West, is that, you know, if it is not fried and dipped in a fry, it's not worth eating it. Okay, so it's just fried food here and there. And then it's fast food, like what you see with KFC. You know, that's what is eaten mostly. Yeah. So I think diet has really helped us too. And also, you know, mitishamba, people take herbals and what have you. I think it has some roles in terms of helping in that case. So yeah, I agree with you, Prof, on that.
Good. Thank you. Would you please comment on treatment? Our understanding from the beginning was that there is no cure, which probably suggests that there is no treatment for it. And if there is, and what medics are doing currently, does it differ? Whatever they are doing, does it differ by variant?
Very, very good question indeed. In terms of treatment, and then do you treat one variant different from the other? So what is given right now is that when somebody is just identified to be having COVID, they give them anti-inflammatory drugs and also antibiotics. You know, antibiotics is not normally recommended for viral infections because a virus will not respond to antibiotics, but because of that possibility of causing lower lobe inflammation and resulting in pneumonia, they usually recommend giving antibiotics in the beginning. And then for inflammation, as I mentioned, 90% of people who die from COVID is not because of the virus replicating. It is the immune system that is just out of control. Okay, like your body is just activating the immune system left, right, without any modulation. And that's why they give these anti-inflammatory drugs to kind of tell the immune system, hey, just keep it cool for now. Let's take care of these problems gradually. So do you treat Omicron different from Delta, from the other? So I think the treatment has been the same throughout. They haven't changed the form of treatment that is being given. What is now changing is that I was looking at, was reading a news article that came out of the company that was making the Pfizer vaccine, stating that they are actually trying to see if they can develop vaccines that keep up with some of these new variants that come about. Like, when Omicron came, they were like, what are we going to do to kind of mitigate this problem before it gets out of hand? And I think that's where they are pushing now, kind of try to come up with specialized vaccine for a particular variant. But the problem is, to develop a vaccine, it takes billions and millions of shillings, dollars to do that. And if the variant like Omicron has come, it seems to be waning down. They may not invest a lot of money in it. But if another variant comes about, they may be able to push it out. But the problem is always getting that vaccine to people. It's just been an issue. So treatment is still the same. Vaccine is what we're pushing. Patrick, I see you have a question. Go ahead and mute and ask.
Yeah, thank you, William, for the good presentation. My question is about the booster vaccine.
Yes.
You say it's recommended that we go for a different one from the original vaccine that we took. How is that? Do they work in the same on the same mechanism?
Very, very good question. So what has been shown is that they did a study where they compare those who got the same vaccine from, like, if they got the Johnson & Johnson, they went back for Johnson & Johnson. I mean, the efficacy rate was still okay, but when they mixed it, they seems to be a little bit higher. So one thing you need to know is that these vaccines were developed to bind different regions within the spike. So you see that spike that sticks out of the virus. So let's say the AstraZeneca is binding right here. And then now you have the Johnson & Johnson is binding here. So what happened is that if you bound here the first time, now you're binding here. So you're kind of getting the virus at every level. So that's what has been shown to happen. So I think the new booster shot, if you mix them up, it seems to be having a robust, because you're now kind of targeting the virus from a different level. It's like having several security guards at the place. Okay. All right, so there's a question that was asked about why does a vaccine, or was it COVID, disrupt the menstrual cycle or something of that? So let me see. Okay, so there's a question about, can COVID-19 cross the placenta barrier? If they can, what are the consequences of developing fetus? So far, they haven't found that coronavirus can cross the placenta. Otherwise, we could have seen it in the babies who are born, because we have other viruses like Zika virus, like human cytomegalovirus. It crosses the placenta barrier. And whenever it does that, it causes something called microcephaly, where a baby is born with a very, very small brain or very small head, okay? And that to disrupt their normal life down the road. So the good thing with COVID, it hasn't been shown to cross the placenta in that case. And if it were to, it will have detrimental issues.
Thank you, Dr. There is one more question.
Yeah.
It is about, are there any studies to show the safety of vaccines in pregnancy? Yeah,
so actually right now, it is safe for pregnant ladies to be vaccinated. There is it hasn't been shown to have any harm on the developing fetus at all. So yeah, go get the shot. It doesn't affect the fetus. In fact, there were some studies where they did for both those who were pregnant and those who are not. And those who got it versus those who did not get it, there wasn't any difference. And as we all know, during pregnancy, the immune system goes down. So this is the population that actually is, compared to the general population, they are the ones actually who need the vaccines. compared just to the general population. And then for children, right now in the US, I think they have lowered the age to 12. And children about 12 years can get the vaccines up. Okay, so now vaccines are being rolled out for children as well. And the good news is that there's a new vaccine that I think is coming, may come out to the market, which is a tablet. All you can do is just swallow it, no more shots for those who are, shot phobic. Okay, so they may get a tablet vaccine in the near future. Okay.
So thank you very much, Dr. It is 10 o'clock now, and that is time for us to stop.
Sure.
There is a request here that you share the slides. I didn't see you use any, but do you have slides? And if you do, there's a request that you share.
Oh, okay.
So maybe you can pass them on to us and we will distribute, we'll set them out.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. There is a question about help us know why the virus mutations is increasing geometrically each day. I don't, it's 10 o'clock, but if you have a one sentence answer to that, that would be good.
Yeah, so the reason why viruses are mutating and increasing by the day, as I mentioned, it's our immune system and it is a transmission rate, okay? And by closing, I like to say that we are really entering election season and people will be meeting and mixing. And what I can say is that if there's been one single most thing that has been shown to really aid in slowing down coronavirus is wearing a mask. So if you can keep social distance, can wash your hands, can do the rest, please wear a mask. And there is now another concern of something called flurona, where you have flu and corona mixing together. People are getting a co-infection. So please, and these both can be prevented with wearing mask and getting vaccinated. Yes, thank you.
So thank you very much, Dr. We'll stop at that. I see there are some more questions, but we were going to run up to 10 o'clock and we'll stick to that. So we thank you very much. I think this has been very enlightening for many of us. And it is really a good thing that we have had this presentation. Thank you everybody for signing in, for participating. We had a very good number today that came in to participate. We are going to be on again next Friday, 9 o'clock, when we will actually be talking about vaccines. So I'm sure that one is going to raise a lot of questions. So please do come back and do let other people know that there are good things. There is good education going on every Friday at 9 a.m. And with that, asanteni sana, kwaherini, and as the Daktari has said, let us all please, please, please keep safe. It is not safe until until there are no more people with the virus. If there is one yet with a virus, you could be actually the next one to get the virus if you are in contact with that one person. So let us keep safe. Thank you very much. See you again next week. Kwaherini.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody. Yeah.